everyone to our session on the Indigenous Women's Divestment Delegations. My name is Osprey, Orielle, and I am the founder of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN, and I'm very honored to be the co-director of the Indigenous Women's Divestment Delegations with Michelle Cook, who will introduce herself in a moment. But before we get started, we wanted to share with you a video of our work, and then we're going to carry on a conversation after that. Thank you.
The decisions you make as Credit Suisse and the Swiss people affect those of us downstream from your actions. You sit here comfortably in your privilege, while our communities bear the risks of your investments with our very health, our lives. We face a future without clean water as you reap your dividends and returns. What do you as Swiss people hold sacred? To us, water is life, to all of us. I request that you directly answer my questions now.
Thank you. I will answer your question, as I said, at the end when everybody has spoken. And the next speaker is MONIQUE, VERDIN.
I'm a shareholder, and I request that you answer our questions individually.
Thank you very much. I'm the chairman who runs this AGM, and I decided I will answer at the end, which is my right, and I have to live with it. Thank you.
I'm here to let the investors know in the Kinder Morgan Pipeline Expansion Project how directly affected we are and how many times that we have opposed this project. We've been marginally ignored within that process, and the consultation that we had required has not been.
Can you guarantee me and my nation that you will no longer have business relationships and provide finance for Kinder Morgan Company?
We are here today to let Credit Suisse and all the other banks that are financing these projects that we have not given our consent, that we find water and clean air and land to be critical infrastructure, not pipelines. We're all citizens of this planet, and what happens in our homelands will affect the people here in Switzerland.
For over a year and a half, we have tried to pursue all legal avenues possible, petitioning our state and federal agencies to conduct environmental impact studies, yet we have been unheard. And our resistance to this corporate colonialism that is tied to carbon extraction is growing, especially during these times where corporations are influencing our government to pass laws restricting our rights. What changes has Credit Suisse made to its due diligence and risk assessment processes following Dakota Access Pipeline?
Investing in a company is just that, whether it's project level or corporate level financing. We need you to stop financing these dangerous companies. Two of the banks our delegation also met with, UBS and DNB, who we provided the same exact information to, chose not to renew their credit facilities with ETP. Yet Credit Suisse has taken no action and has made no statement.
Not once in these calculations of profits is the loss of Indigenous peoples' culture on this planet mentioned as a risk. Credit Suisse has a choice to do the right thing. So until then, Indigenous peoples will continue to wage and escalate a mass globalization, calling for accountability of Credit Suisse in the financial industry. We will call for divestment. We will call for a boycott. We will call for the sanction of Credit Suisse for these Indigenous human rights violations by these oil companies that you are supporting by any and all means necessary.
I ask that the Swiss people stand with us. I ask that you hold Credit Suisse accountable and say no. No, we will not fund these projects that are hurting people and committing human and Indigenous rights abuses.
My name is Michelle Cook. I'm a Dene Navajo human rights lawyer, founder of Divest, Invest, Protect, and the Indigenous Women's Divestment Delegations that I co-direct with We Can International. Thank you so much for joining us. Right now, Indigenous peoples throughout the world, land defenders, are facing criminalization, murder, human rights violations for protecting their lands, territories, and natural resources from extractive industries. Industries that are funded and facilitated by banks, international financial institutions, and insurance companies. Despite these egregious violations, the banks evade justice and rarely, if ever, are held accountable to Indigenous peoples for the roles that they play. Divest, Invest, Protect represents our Indigenous hope and collective power to divest from harmful companies and institutions that harm Indigenous peoples and the planet's biodiversity, to invest in Indigenous peoples-led initiatives and cooperative economic models that benefit and protect our communities for 7 generations to come. As financial systems collapse around us, Indigenous peoples and women demand critical interrogations into the history of money and debt to develop new understandings of trade and sovereign economies to secure a sustainable and equitable future. In this historic moment of crisis, we have the power and opportunity to redefine business as usual, to forge new economic pathways of racial equality, where women and people of color are central actors in the economic decisions that impact them. Stand with us in our fight for corporate accountability, economic equality, and justice for Indigenous peoples and Mother Earth.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for those really important words. And I think in this moment, it's also really vital to highlight that Indigenous communities are disproportionately experiencing the impacts of the dual crises of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the climate crisis due to ongoing colonial policies, extractive economics, as well as environmental racism. And this also includes right now facing ongoing fossil fuel extraction and pipeline struggles in their territories. So I don't think there could be a more important time to demand that financial institutions divest from fossil fuels and are held accountable to their own internal guidelines regarding respect for Indigenous rights and for environmental and sustainability governance. A lot of these institutions have these internal guidelines, but they don't follow them, and we need to really hold them accountable. We Can is committed to calling for banks to stop financing a climate-wrecking and dying fossil fuel industry that is literally killing us. We're also calling for our governments to stop bailouts to the oil and gas sector, when instead we need to be really investing in people and planet and not investing in these polluting industries. So these bailouts have really got to stop. And within this context, one of our highest priorities is lifting up Indigenous women leadership and their communities. And some of you might know that 80% of all the biodiversity left on Earth right now is in the lands and hands of Indigenous peoples. And this is a lot because of their demonstration of respect over a millennium for nature and the natural cycles of Mother Earth. So we need to stand with Indigenous people and stand with their rights and acknowledge that we have so much to learn from Indigenous women, from their traditional ecological knowledge, their cultural practices, and how to live in harmony with nature. And I think it also should be noted at this really vital time that Indigenous people have been warning the dominant culture about what happens when we don't respect the natural laws, and that's been made crystal clear. So this divestment work is really important as we see how under the cover of the COVID-19 pandemic, oil and gas pipelines are being fast-tracked into Indigenous lands, violating Indigenous rights and further putting Indigenous women at risk due to not only health issues, but also because of these man camps when industry workers by literally the thousands come into their communities, bringing illness as well as violence. So these delegations are really important so we can lift up Indigenous women's voices, have them speak truth to power. And I'm so honored that we can continue these divestment delegations, which I think we should also note have bore really critical results. such as hundreds of millions of dollars that have been divested from the fossil fuel industry because of banks that we went to see in Europe. And we're really excited about those actual divestments. There's been lots of education, policy changes, and investigations because of the delegations. So we invite you all to join us as we further this work collectively to dismantle institutionalized colonization, patriarchy, racism, and these really dangerous economic systems that are really, really harmful to people and planet. And I also wanted to say in closing that the COVID-19 pandemic and climate crisis have really turned all of our worlds upside down. Like, this is a special epic moment. And yet we have the chance right now to not go back to where we were, because where we were wasn't working. So please find us online and let's keep up this powerful divestment momentum. We actually have gotten the attention of the financial institutions this year like never before, and we really need them to help us move through these crises. So we're calling for new economic structures based on justice, care, love, and a fierce dedication to people and planet and to Mother Earth. Now is the time.